Midnight, somewhere on a dirt road between Arkansas and Indian Territory. 1879. A group of hooded men blocks the only trail heading west. Torches flicker against the darkness. Rifles are raised. White hoods cover their faces. They have one mission tonight: stop the black marshal from riding through. They have heard the stories. A former slave turned lawman who arrests white outlaws like they are nothing. A man who rides alone into the most dangerous territory in America and comes back with prisoners every single time. Tonight, they will end his legend. Or so they think. What happens in the next few minutes will never make it into your history books. Because when that lone rider appeared on the horizon, when his badge caught the torchlight, when he kept walking his horse straight toward them without slowing down, everything these men believed about power, about race, about fear, shattered into 1,000 pieces. They blocked the road to Oklahoma. Bass Reeves walked straight through them. Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of Bass Reeves? If you went to school in America, probably not. If you watched Westerns growing up, definitely not. And that should make you furious, because Bass Reeves was not just a lawman. He was arguably the greatest lawman the American West ever produced. More arrests than Wyatt Earp. More dangerous missions than any marshal before or since. A career spanning over 3 decades in the deadliest territory on the continent. And he did it all as a black man in an era when black men were being lynched for looking at white women the wrong way. The fact that you do not know his name is not an accident. It is a deliberate erasure. A calculated forgetting designed to maintain a very specific story about who built America and who protected it. Here's what they never taught you. The year is 1838. Bass Reeves is born into slavery in Crawford County, Arkansas. His enslaver is a man named William Reeves, a farmer and later a politician who will eventually become a colonel in the Confederate Army. Bass grows up as property. He is taught nothing about letters or numbers because teaching slaves to read is illegal. But he learns other things. He learns to track animals through dense forest. He learns to read the land the way other children learn to read books. He learns to shoot, becoming so skilled that his enslaver uses him to win shooting competitions against other plantation owners. Think about that for a second. A man is enslaved, treated as less than human, and yet he develops skills so extraordinary that his captor profits from them. This is the origin story they never wanted you to know. When the Civil War erupts in 1861, everything changes. William Reeves joins the Confederate Army and takes Bass with him as a personal servant. But somewhere in the chaos of war, Bass Reeves escapes. The exact circumstances are debated by historians. Some say he beat his enslaver in a card game dispute and had to flee. Others say he simply saw his chance and took it. What matters is this. A man who had been property his entire life risked everything to become free. And where did he go? He vanished into Indian Territory, the lawless land that would one day become Oklahoma. He lived among the Cherokee, the Seminole, and the Creek nations. He learned their languages. He learned their customs. He mastered the terrain that would later become his hunting ground. For 4 years, while America tore itself apart over slavery, Bass Reeves was becoming something the country had never seen before. The war ends in 1865. 4 million black Americans are suddenly free. But you already know what comes next. Freedom on paper means nothing when the people who enslaved you refuse to accept defeat. The Ku Klux Klan rises from the ashes of the Confederacy. Night riders terrorize black communities across the South. In Arkansas and the territories beyond, former Confederates form vigilante groups dedicated to one purpose: making sure that emancipation changes nothing. Black men who try to vote are beaten. Black families who try to own land are burned out. Black people who show any sign of independence are lynched as warnings to others. This is the America that Bass Reeves steps into when he emerges from Indian Territory. And this is the America he will spend the next 30 years fighting. In 1875, something unprecedented happens. Judge Isaac C. Parker arrives at Fort Smith, Arkansas, to take control of the U.S. District Court with jurisdiction over Indian Territory. The territory is a nightmare. Over 70,000 square miles of land with no local law enforcement. Outlaws from every state flee there to escape prosecution. Murder, robbery, and violence are so common that some call it the most dangerous place in America. Parker needs deputy marshals willing to ride into this chaos and bring back fugitives. He needs men who know the territory, who can track through wilderness, who can survive in a land where law means nothing. And here is the part that changes everything. Parker does not care about skin color. He cares about results. When Bass Reeves walks into Fort Smith, speaking fluent Cherokee and Creek, knowing Indian Territory like the back of his hand, able to outshoot any man in Arkansas, Parker sees exactly what he needs. A weapon. The most effective weapon federal law enforcement has ever deployed. Bass Reeves is sworn in as a deputy U.S. Marshal. He is one of the first black lawmen west of the Mississippi. He is given a badge, a writ of authority, and the power to arrest anyone in Indian Territory regardless of race. Do you understand what this means? A man who was born as property, who had been owned like livestock, who had escaped slavery and survived in the wilderness, now has the legal authority to arrest white men, to put them in chains, to drag them before a judge and watch them sentenced to prison or death. In a nation that still debates whether black people are fully human, Bass Reeves carries federal authority in his holster, and he uses it. Over the next 32 years, Reeves will arrest more than 3,000 felons. He will ride into situations that would make other lawmen turn back. He will be ambushed more times than anyone can count, shot at from every direction, targeted by the most dangerous criminals in the territory. And he will never be seriously wounded. Not once. 14 men will die trying to resist arrest by Bass Reeves. 14 men who thought they could outdraw, outshoot, or outrun the Black Marshal. They were wrong, every single one of them. This is not legend. This is not exaggeration. These are the documented facts of one of the most extraordinary law enforcement careers in American history. But here is what the history books leave out. It was not just outlaws who wanted Bass Reeves dead. From the moment he pinned on that badge, he became a target for something far more organized than random criminals. White supremacist groups across the region saw him as an abomination. A black man with authority over white men. A former slave who could arrest former Confederates. An embodiment of everything they were fighting to prevent. The Ku Klux Klan and its affiliated Night Rider groups had a special hatred for black lawmen. They represented the worst nightmare of white supremacy. Proof that black Americans could not only survive without slavery, but could enforce the law against their former masters. And Bass Reeves, the most successful of all black marshals, became their primary target. The attempts on his life were constant. Outlaws put bounties on his head. Supremacist groups planned ambushes along the trails he rode. Informants tried to lead him into traps. Every time Reeves rode out of Fort Smith with warrants in his pocket, he knew he might not come back. Any deputy marshal faced danger, but a black deputy marshal faced danger multiplied by hatred. Every criminal he pursued had extra motivation to kill him. Every white outlaw he arrested became a martyr for the supremacist cause. Every mile he rode through territory controlled by night riders was a mile where death could be waiting behind any tree, any boulder, any turn in the road. Now I want you to picture the scene. It is late at night, sometime in the late 1870s. Reeves is riding through a stretch of trail that connects Arkansas to Indian Territory. He has warrants to serve, dangerous men to arrest, justice to deliver. He rides alone, as he often does. Other deputies sometimes refuse to partner with him. The racism's that deep. So Reeves has learned to work solo, relying on his skills, his instincts, and his absolute refusal to show fear. His Winchester rifle rests across his saddle. 2 Colt revolvers hang at his hips, positioned with the butts facing forward, because Reeves draws cross-handed, faster than anyone who has ever seen him shoot. His eyes scan the darkness ahead. Something is wrong. He sees it before he hears it. Flickering light in the distance. Too organized to be a campfire. Too positioned to be coincidence. As he rides closer, the shape of it emerges from the shadows. Horses lined across the trail. Men standing beside them. Torches held high. And those white hoods? Those unmistakable white hoods covering their faces, turning them into anonymous agents of terror. A KKK roadblock, set up specifically for him. Word has traveled through the territory. The Black Marshal is riding tonight. Here is where we stop him. If you are wondering whether Reeves considers turning back, you do not know Bass Reeves. Turning back means the outlaws he is pursuing escape justice. Turning back means the Klan wins. Turning back means every black lawman after him will be seen as a coward who can be intimidated. Bass Reeves does not turn back. He keeps his horse at a steady walk, not faster, not slower, the same pace he has maintained for miles. As if the roadblock is nothing more than a minor inconvenience. As if a dozen armed white supremacists are not worth adjusting his speed. This is not recklessness. This is calculated psychological warfare. Reeves understands something that his enemies do not. The Klan operates on fear. Their power comes from the terror they inspire, from the belief that resistance is futile, from the assumption that their targets will cower and submit. The moment you show fear, they have won. The moment you act like they have power over you, they do. So Reeves shows nothing. His face is stone. His posture is relaxed. His hands rest easy near his weapons. He rides toward them like a man who has already won. The Klansmen see him approaching. They have been waiting for this. They have rehearsed their threats, prepared their demands, convinced themselves that tonight they will humble the uppity marshal who dares enforce white man's law. One of them calls out. The words echo across the empty trail. Turn back. Drop your badge. This road is close to your kind. The language is cruder than I can repeat here, filled with the venom of men who have never seen a black man as human. They expect Reeves to stop, to negotiate, to show some sign of the fear they have spent years cultivating in black communities. But Reeves does not stop. He keeps riding, closer now, close enough to see their faces beneath the hoods, close enough to count their rifles, close enough to smell the burning pitch of their torches. The Klansmen shift uncomfortably. This is not how it is supposed to go. Their victims run. Their victims beg. Their victims certainly do not walk straight toward them with eyes that show absolutely nothing but cold determination. One of them raises a rifle, pointing it directly at Reeves. This is supposed to be the moment of surrender, the threat of death that breaks resistance. Reeves does not even acknowledge the weapon. Here is what happens next, and I want you to understand how remarkable this is. Reeves rides to within feet of the blockade. He looks at the leader, the man whose body language marks him as the one giving orders, and he speaks. His voice is low and steady. He identifies himself as a deputy U.S. Marshal, operating under the authority of Judge Isaac Parker and the federal government of the United States. He informs them that blocking a federal officer in the execution of his duties is a crime punishable by imprisonment. He tells them they have exactly one choice: move aside or be arrested. Then he waits, not long, just long enough for his words to register, for the reality of the situation to sink in. Subscribe if you like the video, because what happens next is the part they never wanted you to see. The roadblock breaks, not all at once. One man steps aside first, moving his horse off the trail, then another, then more. The line that seemed so solid moments before dissolves into confusion. The Klansmen who had come to terrorize find themselves terrorized. Because Bass Reeves is not just one man, He is the federal government. He is the law. He is the weight of an entire nation's authority, compressed into a single black man on horseback who refuses to yield 1 inch. And they know, in that moment, that killing him will bring consequences they cannot survive. Judge Parker will send every marshal he has. The army will get involved. Their names will be discovered, their families targeted by the legal system they thought they could ignore. Killing a federal marshal is not like lynching a freedman. The government responds to that. Reeves rides through the gap they have created. He does not hurry. He does not look back. He passes through their line like they are nothing, because to him, they are nothing. Obstacles on the way to justice. Cowards who hide behind hoods because they lack the courage to show their faces. Men who talk about white superiority while trembling before a black man who has more authority in his badge than they will ever possess in their entire lives. The road to Oklahoma was blocked. Bass Reeves walked straight through. But I want you to understand something deeper here. This was not just personal courage, though Reeves had that in abundance. This was a demonstration of what happens when black Americans have institutional backing, when the federal government actually enforces its laws equally, when a black man can point to real authority and real consequences. The Klan's power came from operating outside the law in a system that refused to prosecute them. The moment they faced someone with actual legal authority and the willingness to use it, they crumbled. Remember that. It matters. The stories of Bass Reeves multiplied across Indian Territory after incidents like this. Outlaws learned to fear his name. Criminals who had laughed at other lawmen surrendered without resistance when they heard Reeves was coming for them. His reputation became so powerful that many fugitives simply gave up rather than face him. Think about that. In a territory full of murderers, bank robbers, and desperados, the most terrifying thing was a black man with a badge. Not because he was cruel, not because he was corrupt, but because he was relentless. He never stopped. He never quit. He never let racism, threats, or violence deter him from his mission. Can I tell you about some of his methods? Because this is where it gets fascinating. Reeves was a master of disguise. He understood that a black deputy marshal riding openly through territory was an obvious target, so he became invisible. He dressed as a farmer, as a drifter, as a preacher. He rode into outlaw camps, pretending to be a fugitive himself. He gathered information by making criminals trust him. Then, when the moment was right, he revealed who he really was and made his arrests. One famous story involves Reeves disguising himself as a tramp, approaching a cabin where 2 outlaw brothers were hiding. He convinced them he was harmless, got invited inside for dinner, and arrested both of them before they could reach their weapons. He walked 2 armed murderers out of their own home without firing a shot. His tracking abilities were legendary. Reeves could follow a trail that other marshals could not even see. He read the land like text. Broken twigs, disturbed soil, the angle of bent grass. Nothing escaped his notice. Criminals who thought they had disappeared into the wilderness found Reeves appearing behind them days later, patient and inevitable. Some said he had supernatural abilities. The truth was simpler. He had spent years living in that territory, learning it during the Civil War, becoming one with it in ways that no white lawman ever could. The wilderness was not his obstacle. It was his advantage. Here is another story that shows you who Bass Reeves really was. In 1902, near the end of his career, Reeves received a warrant for a man named Benny Reeves. The charge was murder. The suspect was his own son. Think about that for a moment. Put yourself in that position. You have a warrant for your child. Every instinct screams to look the other way, to let someone else handle it, to find any excuse not to be the one who brings your son to justice. Bass Reeves did not hesitate. He tracked his son down personally. He arrested him. He brought him back to Fort Smith to stand trial. His son was convicted and sentenced to prison. Reeves never wavered in his duty. When people asked him about it afterward, Reeves said something that captures everything about who he was. He said the law was the law, and he had sworn an oath. That oath did not have exceptions for family, for friends, for anyone. If you broke the law in his jurisdiction, Bass Reeves was coming for you. Period. No excuses, no favoritism, no corruption. In an era when white lawmen routinely ignored crimes by other white men, when justice was applied selectively based on race and connection, Bass Reeves treated the law as something sacred, something that applied equally to everyone, including his own flesh and blood. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever seen a movie about Bass Reeves? Have you ever read a novel about him? Have you ever seen his face on a postage stamp, his name in a headline, his story taught in schools? Because here is the truth that should make your blood boil. The Lone Ranger, that iconic figure of American frontier mythology, was almost certainly inspired by Bass Reeves. The similarities are too numerous to ignore. An expert marksman who uses disguises. A lawman who works in partnership with a Native American companion. Reeves worked closely with indigenous communities his entire career. Someone who represents justice in a lawless land. But who got the credit? A fictional white man. A made-up character based on a real black hero, whitewashed and sanitized for an American audience that could not accept a black protagonist. This is not conspiracy theory. Historians have traced the connections. The Lone Ranger first appeared in 1933, 2 decades after Bass Reeves died. The creators knew the stories coming out of Indian territory. They knew about the legendary Black Marshal. They took his characteristics, his accomplishments, his legend, and they painted it white. Because in 1933 America, a black hero was unthinkable, even in fiction, even when the reality was staring them in the face. The erasure of Bass Reeves from popular consciousness is one of the most deliberate acts of historical theft in American culture. Let me bring this back to that night on the road to Oklahoma. When Bass Reeves faced down that KKK roadblock, he was not just one man against a dozen. He was the answer to a question that white supremacy could not afford to ask. What happens when black people have power? What happens when they have badges and guns, and a law behind them? What happens when the former slave becomes the one with authority? The answer terrified the people who built their entire worldview on black inferiority. Because when Bass Reeves walked through that blockade, he proved that black Americans could not only match white Americans in courage and competence, but exceed them. He was better than the outlaws he hunted. He was better than the Klansmen who tried to stop him. He was better than most of the white lawmen who worked alongside him. And he did it while carrying the extra weight of racism, threats, and isolation that none of them had to bear. The KKK roadblock was not an isolated incident. Throughout his career, Reeves faced organized resistance from white supremacist groups. They put prices on his head. They spread rumors to undermine him. They tried to have him removed from his position through political pressure. None of it worked. For over 3 decades, Bass Reeves rode through territory that wanted him dead and came back alive every single time. 14 men who tried to kill him ended up in the ground instead. More than 3,000 criminals sat in Judge Parker's courtroom because Reeves had tracked them down. The numbers are almost unbelievable. No other marshal of that era came close. And yet, when Bass Reeves died in 1910, there was barely a mention in the newspapers. The man who had done more to bring law to Indian territory than anyone else. The man who had faced down the Klan and outlaws and the entire weight of American racism passed away in obscurity. His grave was unmarked for decades. His story was not told in schools. His name vanished from public memory while fictional white cowboys became American icons. This was not an accident. This was not oversight. This was erasure. Systematic and deliberate and absolutely intentional. Here is why this story matters now. Every time someone tells you that black history is just slavery and suffering, remember Bass Reeves. Every time someone suggests that black Americans needed white saviors to achieve anything, remember Bass Reeves. Every time someone claims that systemic change is impossible, that one person cannot make a difference against organized hatred, remember the night a single black man rode through a KKK roadblock because he had a job to do. The existence of Bass Reeves proves something that white supremacy has spent a century and a half trying to hide. Given equal opportunity, given legal backing, given the resources that white Americans take for granted, black Americans do not just survive, they excel, they dominate, they become legends. But opportunity was exactly what they took away. After Reconstruction ended, after federal support for black rights evaporated, the progress that men like Bass Reeves represented was systematically destroyed. Black lawmen were removed from their positions. Black voters were disenfranchised. Black communities that had built wealth and power were targeted for destruction. Tulsa, Rosewood, Wilmington. The list goes on. Every time black Americans achieved success, white supremacy mobilized to take it away. And then historians rewrote the story to make it seem like black success had never happened at all. Bass Reeves served until 1907, when Oklahoma achieved statehood. The new state government, controlled by white Democrats committed to Jim Crow, had no place for black federal marshals. Reeves spent his final years as a police officer in Muskogee, still serving, still protecting, still doing his duty until his health failed. He died of kidney disease at 71 years old. A man who had survived dozens of gunfights, who had ridden millions of miles through hostile territory, who had faced down the Klan and every outlaw in Indian Territory, died quietly in his bed. His legacy was immediately buried. But here is the thing about buried truth. It does not stay buried forever. Over the past few decades, historians have been uncovering the real story of Bass Reeves. His name is finally being recognized. Statues are being erected. His story is being told. Not because white America suddenly developed a conscience, but because black historians, black researchers, and black communities refused to let him be forgotten. They dug through archives. They collected oral histories. They demanded recognition for a man their grandparents had never stopped talking about, even when the textbooks pretended he did not exist. The resurrection of Bass Reeves is an act of resistance itself. Every time his story is told, the lie of American history gets a little smaller. Subscribe if you liked the video. And tell me something in the comments. Did you learn about Bass Reeves in school? Did anyone ever mention the black marshals of Indian Territory? If not, ask yourself why. Ask yourself who decided what history you would learn and what history would be hidden from you. Ask yourself what other stories are waiting to be discovered. Let me leave you with this image. A dusty road somewhere between Arkansas and Oklahoma. Night falling. Torches in the distance. A blockade of hooded men who believe their hatred makes them powerful. And one rider approaching. Calm, steady, unyielding. A man who has already survived more than they can imagine. A man who carries authority they cannot take away. A man who knows that fear is a choice, and he has chosen differently. Bass Reeves rides forward. The blockade breaks. The Klan scatters into the darkness. And justice continues toward Indian Territory, unstoppable, inevitable, and unafraid. They blocked the road to Oklahoma. Bass Reeves walked straight through them. He did it because he had warrants to serve and fugitives to arrest. He did it because turning back meant letting terrorists win. He did it because his entire life had prepared him for that moment. Slavery had not broken him. War had not broken him. Racism had not broken him. Why would a few cowards in bedsheets be any different? The KKK relied on fear. Bass Reeves had none to give them. Remember his name. Remember what he did. Remember that for over 30 years, a black man was the law in one of the most lawless places in America. Remember that he arrested more criminals than any marshal before or since. Remember that he walked through a Klan roadblock like they were not even there. Remember that his story was stolen, erased, whitewashed into fiction, and buried under a century of deliberate forgetting. And remember that despite all of that, the truth survived. Because you are hearing it now. Because you will share it. Because Bass Reeves was too legendary to stay hidden forever. The road to Oklahoma is open. It has been open for 150 years now. And every time you drive through that land, every time you see the plains stretching to the horizon, remember who made it possible to travel safely. Remember the marshals who brought law to chaos. Remember the black man who was better than all of them. Remember Bass Reeves. Remember him walking through that blockade. Remember him never looking back. That is the history they never wanted you to know. Now you know it. And now it is your turn to make sure no one ever forgets again.